And welcome to another presentation for EDET 620 Educational Technology. In this presentation, I am going to provide a review of the last assignment that you completed, which had to do with reviews. And I am going to be addressing the fact that this last project that you completed on reviews was the last project that you completed in this course that addresses how you might use technology to support your instructional efforts as an educator. After this, the next project addresses some of the ways in which you will investigate how technology might be used to help build community among and between all of the different people involved in promoting learning in a typical classroom. If you recall from the course Big Picture, up to this point, we have addressed the different ways in which technology might be used to support improving instructional efforts of teachers. And of course, we only scratched the surface on the types of tools and strategies that teachers might use to be able to do a better job of promoting the learning of specific outcomes. But hopefully you learned something important about the role and the value of technology in improving instructional efforts. Next, and now, you are going to be looking at some of the ways in which you might use technology to help build community. And that's another important element or aspect of teaching that I believe technology can play a really important role in as far as improving the general instructional practice of any teacher, whether it's preschool teacher or all the way through high school and college. Following the projects related to community building, you will also do some projects to finish out the course and how you use technology to help manage your job as an educator, as well as how you might use technology to continually improve your practice through professional learning experiences. So just a quick reminder, up to this point, you completed about 8 or 9 projects that had to do with specific ways you might use individual technology tools to help improve instruction. And we started by looking at, well, really, we started by having you develop an online portfolio, a creative experience using Weebly that allows you to communicate your work to me, allows you to apply a lot of good technology skills, from embedding files to organizing an online presence to embedding videos and arranging and managing menus to communicating clear directions. All of that reflects really good skills that address how to use technology to at least begin the process of supporting a learning experience. And I have been able to easily access your work using these online technologies and evaluate your work and provide you with feedback. You looked at some of the specific ways you might use technology to help define meaningful learning experiences related to creation or problem solving or real. And related to that, you looked at how Google Earth might be used as a context for communicating important information, as well as for helping students communicate information about themselves. And some of you use Powtoons and Prezi to help communicate information, organized information, to potential learners. So those were just some of the ways in which you gained some instruction as well as practice on how you might use technology to help improve, the practice of typical educators. While we're on the subject of improving teaching with technology, so far in this class, you have been provided with a really big 30,000-foot view of how technology might be used to improve teaching. You looked at ways in which instruction might be improved, We're going to begin to address how technology might be used to build community. And we're going to end the course by looking at specific ways in which you can use technology to help you manage your job better, as well as continually improve your practice. But I wanted to connect one of the other big pictures that was presented in this class down here to the big picture above, and that is that when you design instruction as an educator, you're not only creating instruction, but you are also implementing it as well as evaluating it. And when you create instruction, you are actually creating components that contribute to an effective learning experience, and they include articulating worthwhile learning goals or outcomes, introducing learning experiences in ways that help communicate what's being learned, where it fits into a big picture, motivates learners, that kind of thing. You also looked at some of the ways in which technology can help provide information, as well as define activities that provide meaning and purpose. And then the last experience that you had, well, let me go back and say that you also looked at how technology can provide a variety of learning scaffolds for learners. And then you finally, you ended with some interesting and specific ways in which technology might be used to help learners review the learning experience. So that was sort of just scratching the surface, as I mentioned, on how technology can be used to help promote instruction. And as indicated, what we're going to be moving into is how technology can be used to promote community building. But I did want to spend a few moments reviewing the last project that you completed in this course. And I also wanted to spend a few moments reviewing kind of some of the really important messages provided in this course. What you see on the screen right now is a very popular book right now by Robert Marzano. It's called The Art and Science of Teaching, and it provides, as the book title indicates, a comprehensive framework for effective instruction. A lot of faculty members now and a lot of school divisions now are using this text or this model to define what constitutes an effective instruction, and more specifically, what might constitute effective instructional planning on your part as an educator. Now, I have to tell you that there has been many models throughout the years that have been used by school divisions to help teachers better understand what their roles and responsibilities are in the area of planning instruction. And to me, this is really just the latest iteration of other models that are actually quite similar. I got my teaching license almost 30 years ago, and I was provided by my school division with a model by Madeline Hunter on the effective elements of instruction, and it was nearly identical to this model. So there's nothing really new in this model, to be honest with you, but unfortunately, what isn't new with this model, and what is reflected in many teaching and learning models leading up to this, are some of the really important aspects of effective instruction that are never addressed in typical planning models, including the one by Marzano here. And I briefly touched on these in some of the previous projects, and I just wanted to kind of remind you of what I'm talking about. So first of all, I want to just say that when I was presented with information about what was missing in these models, to be honest with you, what was really missing, when I learned about this, I had an experience that was similar to something that my son pointed out to me about 10 years ago. And this might sound silly, but bear with me. This is my example. He pointed out to me that we were driving down the street one day and a FedEx truck went zooming by, and he said, "Hey, Dad, did you ever notice that in the FedEx logo there is an arrow?" Here, I'm highlighting it for you so you can see it. And he went on to talk about how important that was in communicating, the overall strategy and purpose of FedEx, moving things, getting things from A to B. So he pointed out that arrow, which is a very, very clever inclusion in what I think is a relatively simple logo. But I'm pointing this out because once he pointed this out to me, I never since have been able to look at a FedEx logo without seeing the arrow. And I went at least 10, maybe 15 years without ever seeing it. And I'm pointing this out, and perhaps this will happen to you now. Now you'll be driving out down the street and you'll never see the FedEx logo the same again. Well, I'm hoping that you never see the important strategies that are missing from typical models of instructional planning, like Marzano. I'm hoping that you never see that the same again as well. And as I mentioned earlier in the course, there are two really big ways in which I think instructional planning falls woefully short. The most important of which is context, and I'll talk about that in just a minute. And the other one has to do with ensuring that you promote the learning of skills that are worth learning. And here's another big picture that helps underscore that importance. Here is a transcript of somebody. I just grabbed it online. I don't know who the student is. Based on the transcript, this is from Ball State University from 2005. So I don't know who this person is. They got pretty good grades if you look at it. Mostly all A's and B's. So obviously a decent student. But I'm presenting this because if you look at your college transcript, I can almost guarantee that for nearly all of you, you will be able to notice classes in which you cannot for the life of you recall one thing you learned in it now that you're kind of removed from it. Here in the fall term of this student is calculus. A course in economics on survey ideas in the first semester. Here in the spring semester, Western Civ. You ever do this? You should do this. Look at your college transcript and circle classes that when you look at it now that you're a few years removed, or maybe for some of you more than a few years, look at it and ask yourself, what in the world did I learn how to do in that class in business statistics or information decisions, an accounting course? What did I learn? What did I learn how to do? If you can't recall, and if you're like me, I think I could probably cross off half my transcripts for college and say, you know what? I cannot think of one important thing I learned. And the key word there is important. Can't think of anything important to be learned. And if it's not important to you at this stage in your life, then it's not really going to be learned well, generally speaking. And the same can be true for somebody in second grade or third grade or fifth or any other testing grade. If it's not important to the learners to be learned, and then it's not going to become part of changing their behavior. And if it doesn't change their behavior, if they can't do anything different as a result of being exposed to material associated with that, then it was, for all intents and purposes, a waste of time. And I will tell you right now that there's nothing in the Marzano model that addresses questions about whether something is worth learning or not. And that falls on you, the teacher. That's your job to help students make those decisions. It's your job to decide what's important to be learned, and it's your job to help design instruction to help promote those important skills. Yes, you might have some skills related to mandated standards of learning or whatnot that you might not be able to easily see are important, but those are not the beginning and end of a course. They're not the beginning and end of a child's school year. So it's really important to choose wisely. And one of the things you had to do in this class was to help communicate your impressions about what's worth learning. And that's an important skill to keep practicing, because as an educator, you make those decisions every day when you walk into the classroom. Now, the other important aspect of instructional planning that never seems to be part of any models has to do with what I think is the most important element in instructional planning, and that is context. This is our big picture in which I communicated about a learner entering into a learning experience, and they may not be able to do something when they enter the learning experience. At least hopefully they can't, because that's their purpose for entering into the experience. So they enter your classroom, whatever it is, whatever grade level, and there's a collection of important things that they can't do. And it's your job as their teacher to help them learn how to do those things. So here we have a young learner who doesn't know how to do a lot of things. They enter into a series of learning experiences, and if they're effective when they emerge from the end of these collective experiences, then they do know how to do those things that you want them to be able to do, like, for example, read from a book. And generally speaking, effective learning experiences include effective introductions, and we looked at a little bit of that, effective activities and information, particularly information that is communicated in effective manners, lots of practice and feedback, kind of the heart of the whole thing, a review, which helps promote learning, and you learned a little bit more about that in your last assignment. And then you have other characteristics of an effective learning experience that include reflecting on what you're learning about, scaffolds to help you learn procedures, learn how to think about problems or think about difficult learning experiences, all those support mechanisms, as well as communicating among and between the important people in the learning environment and collaborating with them, collaborating with the teacher, collaborating with other students, collaborating with family members. All of these elements promote effective learning experiences, and surrounding all of it is context, probably the most important aspect of instructional planning. And context represents the kind of the collective variables that define who, what, when, where, why, and how a learner is going to learn something. And it's the meaning behind doing anything. So context, and again, it's super important. And we looked at a model for promoting context, and we have these contrived categories, 3 broad ones: creation, problem solving, and then real, and those are contexts. And then there are all these subcategories. For example, if reading is the end goal, if reading is the collective learning outcomes for a particular experience, then there are many contexts that you can define as an educator that are real, that provide meaning and purpose for reading, that are real, or creative, creating a story and communicating it to others. So context is to me one of the most important aspects of instructional planning, and I think technology can go a long way towards promoting meaningful learning contexts, as communicated earlier in the course. Now, you just finished a project in which you looked at one of the final aspects of what constitutes an effective instructional experience, and that is a reviewing a learning experience. Research suggests that when learners actively review things that they just learned how to do, that promotes retention, and it promotes kind of it processes skills and helps them become part of the permanent behavior change. So that's why we did review. And of course, in the review, we addressed strategies such as how you might use technology to help learners communicate what the key ideas were in a learning experience, what the key content ideas. And of course, you don't need electronic technology to promote this. Here's a picture of a student who communicated a summary of the French and Indian War, things they learned about, and they didn't have to use They didn't have to use, Bubble Us or Glyphy or CMap or any other tool they could have. But in this case, they just used a piece of paper and some colored pencils, and that is just as good, of course. Because hopefully one of the things you're learning about in this class is that the media does not really matter. It's what you do with it. So you can have an electronic flowcharting piece of software like Inspiration, and frankly, it doesn't matter whether you're using a piece of software like that or a blank sheet of paper and colored pencils where you draw the arrows instead of clicking them, and you write out the text with your hands on a pencil instead of typing them. That stuff doesn't matter. What matters is what you do with it. So, but again, one aspect of reviewing is communicating what the key ideas were, what you learned how to do in a learning experience. And I love the idea of these video diaries. Why not? Why aren't more teachers having students pair up, reflect on what they just learned how to do in a video, and then posting those videos to, to something like Facebook where their parents have access to it? So they can so the students have an opportunity to formally reflect on what they learned how to do, and parents have a much greater connection to what their kids are really learning how to do and why in a learning experience. That's awesome. There's no reason why teachers aren't doing that. It's easy. Another important aspect of review is trying to figure out or situate what you just learned how to do and where it fits into the big picture. Now, I don't remember if I brought up this example of a big picture before, but I have it here. This is one I used as a biology teacher when I taught 9th grade biology back in the good old days of teaching. And I had a big, giant, wall-sized picture of this organizational structure for some of the important concepts promoted throughout the entire year in biology. And for example, let's say that you were promoting skills associated with how organisms evolve over time. So evolution is your topic. A very important topic in the field of biology because it's a unifying theme and framework for understanding an awful lot about how organisms change over time, as well as how explaining the pattern of organisms and their life today. So evolution, very important. And one of the things that you're going to learn about in evolution is that one very important component in evolution is that individual changes or individual variations in members of a population interact with the dynamics of the community in which they live, all the living organisms that constitute the area where organisms live, as well as the ecosystem where the communities reside. And the ecosystem involves the biotic or living components of the area where organisms live, as well as the abiotic factors that influence them. Abiotic being those things that aren't living but have an impact on living things, such as temperature, climate, moisture, soil conditions, that kind of thing. Those are abiotic, but they influence biotic things. All of that has to be well understood in order to really understand evolution. So where does the learning fit in? If students are learning skills associated with evolution, I can point to this aspect of the course big picture and situate skills associated with evolution to this part of the picture. Now, what's next? What I could say next is if my students were out investigating investigating changes over time in living organisms. Let's say that they were doing a lab in which they were looking at specimens or evidence of living things in a particular ecosystem over a long period of time. So they were looking at fossils and fossil records, and what they learned is that certain organisms appear to have changed different structures over time. And it seemed, based on observations, that those structures enable the organisms to be more competitive or survive better in that particular environment, in the community in which they lived. Well, if that's the case, and what's next as a teacher in biology is, I might say, well, okay, let's look at the mechanisms that might have caused organisms to change over time. So you can identify that they do, that the that the genetic expression of particular traits change over a particular period of time. That's evolution. You can observe that in the long term, or you can even observe it in the short term with petri dishes and bacteria. But let's say that, okay, so we learned about that, and now we were going to be investigating mechanisms for change. How does that happen? Well, one of the things you quickly learn as a biology teacher is, of course, that the engine of evolution is variation in offspring. That is the key component to enabling organisms to actually change over time. And so variations in organisms in a population would reside here. So I could point out on this big picture that when we were going to be looking at the characteristics that enable evolution exist among individual organisms in a population, and I could point it, I could key into this big picture. So that's another important thing, an important way to use a big picture, and it's an important component of a proper instructional review. Now, I do want to point out something, by the way, and this is beside the fact, but I used to teach biology, and one of the things I learned as a researcher, as an instructional planning and implementation researcher, is that one of the best approaches to learning anything is to go from the conceptual big to the conceptual little. So you address the learning of concepts that are conceptually large, and universe is about as large as you get conceptually when you're studying the natural world. There might be something bigger than the universe. That's the big question up here. But you start with the universe and you travel through the components of a universe. And when you're studying biology, instead of earth science, you kind of deviate here at this point and you begin to study living things. And the reason why I'm pointing this out is that many textbooks, and I would say most textbooks, actually present information from chapters 1 to 37 in the opposite direction. They tend to begin with biochemistry, molecules and organelles, and start with cell theory early. And the thinking there is obviously that you have to have a good foundation, a foundational understanding of these concepts before you move to the concepts that that are comprised of those. Well, I think that's a little bit of a myth in terms of learning and in terms of understanding. So I'm just pointing that out. A seed. Perhaps it's a seed that will find purchase in your learning brains right now and will grow into you doing things different and more effective in the future. Also, of course, a good review addresses what you were supposed to learn how to do, what the objectives were, restating the objectives. Many classrooms in this part of the Virginia right now, teachers are sort of compelled to write objectives on the board. And that's fine, but certainly they need to be used as an instructional tool, and they're not much value early in the learning experience, but they're very good at the end as part of a review. And of course, the KWL chart is something that can be part of a great review. Should not be just be part of the beginning of a learning experience, but certainly be part of the review where you talk about what students did learn how to do. And why. So there's just typical chart, KWL chart, how a pumpkin grows. One thing I hate, by the way, FYI, a little side note, one thing I hate about these KWIs is that it focuses on what I know, knowledge. And of course, most of the important things that we have ever learned, either in school or out, don't have anything to do with knowledge. They have to do with skills that are way beyond knowledge. And so I hate KWLs for the fact that it focuses on knowledge, pumpkins are orange, they grow in the fall, that kind of stuff, instead of the important things, which is, okay, what I want to know, why are pumpkins orange? Well, if you focus on knowledge, then the teacher's just going to come right out and talk about the types of chemicals that are included in the cells that are part of the pumpkin's outer layer of tissue, and that gives it an orange hue, and that's horrible. That doesn't say why are they orange. Why orange instead of another color? What's the purpose? Why is an orange, for crying out loud? What's its purpose for being brightly colored? There has to be some reason, and there are probably a lot of good hypotheses out there that kids can mull about. Maybe the orange keeps animals away or organisms away that might damage the seeds. Maybe the orange is part of the food structure for the seeds. Maybe the orange attracts organisms that will take the orange and carry it off and distribute the seeds somewhere else. There are many good reasons, and really schools should be invested in investigating and having kids learn the why on their own, the skills that underlie addressing the why, and not just knowledge, because that stuff is meaningless, and it goes in and it goes out, and you can go back to your college transcript and start crossing off classes if you want some evidence of why a knowledge-based course isn't really worth very much. But again, I'm just pontificating. All right, now we're going to head into the showtime for this next project, and this has to do with community building. So the next two projects you are going to do in this class address some of the specific ways in which technology might be used to help build community. And so I'm going to provide you with a little bit of background information now before you head in to the next project. So first of all, I just wanted to say a word about the types of communities that are important for educators to consider. Of course, you have the in-class communities, and that's if you teach a self-contained class, like say third grade, you've got a tremendous, vibrant, rich, and deep community among 25 or so individual learners and a teacher who are part of that community, and that might also include special ed aides or anybody else. You also have a school community, and that is the community that goes beyond just the walls of a classroom, but students in other classes, other teachers, administrators, and anybody else who helps promote and make a school move forward. You also have the local community, and that involves the school and all of the where the school is situated in the world. Most schools are certainly part of towns or cities, and they the businesses, all the people who inhabit the community who don't go to the school, all of that represents important elements of the community that would be local. And of course, nothing is isolated. All schools, all communities, all local communities are part of broader communities, whether that's a county or a region or a state or the United States or now the world. One thing technology has done is open up the world to a typical classroom. You can have students in any given day talk to other students their age in classrooms in any other part of the world. And then one community that kind of doesn't get a lot of airplay but is really important for teachers to consider all the time are professional communities. And those are the communities of other teachers who have the same kinds of vested interests that you do, as well as the people who work for professional organizations. Even your involvement at Radford University, or any university for that matter, any university that you're attending, represents part of your professional community, people invested in helping you continually improve. And of course, that's a lifelong exercise for you as a professional educator. Now, the projects that you're going to be doing in the two small projects for this class are going to be focusing on strategies for building community. And so I want to talk a little bit about how do you build a community? What do you do to help ensure that either in the classroom or locally or globally for that matter, that you're part of a vibrant community? Because it does require tending, it requires planning and purpose. You have to do it. And so I want to talk just a little bit about that. First of all, I want to say that many of you are probably already using technology to help you support your own community building efforts. Communication is at the key to building community, and email has kind of changed how we communicate with parents, other students, and other professionals. Blogs allow us to communicate with information posted on a website, and so you have this opportunity now on the web to post and to be a presence on the web. That's important. We're going to look at in this section of the class at some tools like Class Dojo, actual tools that are designed to promote community, and in the case of Class Dojo, I think do a really good job. Also, building websites like you're doing now in this class, Weebly, Google Sites, whatever, that helps build community. And a really good example of a technology-supported tool that has really had an impact for some people on helping to build or maintain community is Facebook. And I say maintain community because Facebook has a lot of built-in tools that keep people connected with each other, keep people communicating with each other, and that is absolutely key to building community. And Facebook makes it a little bit easier than than other tools to promote that. So how can technology be used to promote community? I think it's very obvious. You just have to take a closer look at how it is promoting community, and that's your answer there. So let's look at some specific strategies that research suggests promote community. Number one is teachers and students need to establish a social presence. Now, it's easy to do in a classroom if you're all together, because you're all together, and establishing a social presence is a matter of communicating with each other in the same room who you are, what you are, what you like, what you dislike. It's about getting to know you, and so it's easy to do that in a classroom, but technology can do a really good job of helping to establish a social presence for people who aren't always in the same room, like parents, teachers and parents. So it's important, number one, to establish a social presence in order to start building community. And so having pages that communicate information about you helps parents learn more about you, and it would be great to have that two-way for you to be able to get the Facebook profiles of all your parents. That again, the social presence helps support a community. It's also important to establish a gathering place. That's another key characteristic of building community. Make access easy and communicate the purpose of your group carefully and clearly in a gathering place. And one of the reasons why Facebook is probably one of the most important community building tools that's come along in a while is that it has very carefully and very methodically become a gathering place. Facebook has made it very easy to stay connected to Facebook. They've even offered their login features as part of many other websites that have nothing to do with Facebook. And to be honest with you, that was all done very in a calculated way to keep Facebook at the front of your thinking, because it's there and it works and it pushes, for most people who have Facebook, it pushes communication out at you. You can get notifications on your phone or on your computer that people have liked something you posted, or responded to a friend request, or posted something new or whatever. So that's a gathering. It gets you to go to Facebook, and Facebook is the gathering place. Well, you need to do that for yourself as a teacher, and that could be a blog, could be a Weebly website, it could be anything, as long as you clearly communicate what that is to the other people involved, the students in your class and the parents and whatnot. So that's another important characteristic. Also, number one, you got to get to know the students, parents, and actually anybody else involved in the learning experience. If you work at a school where the principal and the assistant principal are invested and involved in classroom experiences directly, well, then you have to know them too. So, and again, technology can be used to do this. If everybody's on Facebook, then you can look at their profiles. If they're not, then there might be some other way to gather profile-like information. You could send out a survey at the beginning of the class or of the school year for parents, students, and administrators to fill out and get some understanding of who they are. But both you and everybody else in the community need to know who you are, and the more you know about your students and their lives, the better teacher you're going to be. And that isn't just a Hallmark card soundbite. That is truth with a capital T. Well, obviously communicating is one part of building community, and again, technology can go a long way to help promote this. Being connected via a blog, via texting, via social media, via email. Those are all ways in which communicating among and between all the stakeholders in a learning environment can be promoted. And that's how you build community, certainly, is through communication. And of course, for those of you who might be married or in a serious relationship or who are children of parents, you have already learned by now that there is nothing more important in your relationship than effective communication. And the same is true for those who you're teaching. It's also important in community to promote membership, that you belong, that you have a mascot. You're the Falcons, you're the Eagles, whatever. It's important to do something to help everybody who's involved in the community believe that they belong to something, and it's something distinct, specific, and inclusive of them. Also, you need to provide a belief that those involved in the community have some influence, And I say belief in influence because it doesn't have to be influence necessarily. For example, some teachers promote the idea that you should work with your students at the beginning of the school year and have them communicate what they think the rules should be, the classroom rules should be for behavior, and that's good because it does provide it makes them buy in to the fact that their voice matters. Of course, if you're a teacher, you're going to want to massage that to your own ends because generally speaking, you know better than them when it comes to managing behavior. At least you should, and students are only going to be thinking of themselves when they're thinking of rules, which is okay, but you're thinking of managing a class, and that's a different perspective. And so it's important for you to have your own absolutes when it comes to rules, but providing the belief that their voice matters is important. And so that's part of being in a community. I suppose you could say the same thing about being an American citizen. We have this democracy, we vote, we like to believe that our vote counts. That might not be true in all circumstances, but at least we believe. But believing it is true. Believing we can have an influence is something that really sustains us as members in this community. So, super important. And also ensuring that the community and communicating that the community will help all members of the community fulfill their own needs, Like, take, for example, parents. Parents have a need to believe that the schools are making good decisions, that the schools are nurturing their children in ways that are healthy and beneficial and are going to help their children achieve their own goals. That parents need that. They need to believe that from schools, and so the community needs to promote that idea, that belief. And it's the same with individual learners. They need to believe that the community that they're in has rules that are going to keep them safe, has rules that are going to help them feel like they belong to something bigger than themselves, you know? And so that's a personal need that people have that the community should be able to fulfill. And so it's important to keep that in mind when you're trying to build community. Another thing that and one way to do that is on this screen, promoting shared emotional connections. I have this picture up here of people on a tour, because if you've ever been on a tour before, you know, being led by a tour guide, something weird usually happens on a tour, and that is at some point in the tour, you start to feel like the people that you're with, like you're all a group. You start to feel this kinship with the people you're with. Even though you might not have talked to any of them, you might have only looked them in the eye, shared a smile or a nod, maybe. But the reality is you are becoming community because you're having the same experiences they are at the same time in the same place. And that is something that ties tiny emotional threads with others. And those emotional threads, whether they're articulated, you know, directly or not, they build something. They build, you know, they sew a fabric of experience together, and that's community. And so doing things to promote that with your learners in community is important. Having experiences, you know, giving everybody, for example, a website to go to at the beginning of the school year and have everybody weigh in on it, you know, and that website might be something that is an actual tour, you know, a tour of a Smithsonian exhibit, and say, hey, we're going to be studying something in the near future about this particular topic, and here's an online tour that we don't have time to go to in class exactly, but I'd like you all to go to it and tell me what you think. Write it below. You know, everybody responding will have had the same experience, and that can be very meaningful. And it can, again, it's one of those things that can build community. And of course, I don't just believe in technology-supported ways to do this. Certainly, having a group of parents show up for an evening of something, a performance. You know, doing a performance and having all the parents there. That's a shared emotional experience. That's a community-building effort. And that's why they're so important. So you need to consider that in terms of building community. And finally, it's really important for you to build professional communities or professional networks, is to network with other teachers, whether it's next door, or whether it's in the teacher's lounge, or whether you do it online. Pinterest has amazing communities of teachers who teach same grade levels and or subject areas, sharing some great stuff, and not just to go and take advantage of what they posted, but to be part of it, to contribute, to post feedback, information, get into conversations online. Those are all ways in which you can build a professional learning community, and that can be very important and improve your job. And communities also are specifically designed to facilitate constructive collaboration skills. Any teacher, no matter what grade level, should be in the business of promoting collaboration. And the thing about collaboration is that students don't just learn how to collaborate by being thrown into groups, by being thrown into small groups, or even by being thrown into a classroom together. Not all students will learn from that experience how to be a productive member of that group. They have to learn it. And there are specific skills that promote constructive collaboration, and it should be every teacher's job to help students learn those skills. And they need to be learned in the same way you would teach a math lesson, the same way you would teach a social studies lesson. Of course, the only big difference is that a great number of math lessons and a great number of social studies lessons, in my humble opinion, are quite worthless compared to collaboration skills. I can't remember the last time I applied algebra, but certainly I had to apply constructive collaboration skills multiple times just today. So they're super important. And if you're a math teacher or a social studies teacher, I hope you're smiling right now, because I'm one of those students who is saying to the teacher all the time, why do we have to learn this? And just as a side note, you better have a good answer to that question for everything you teach. And I think you can. I think social studies and math teachers can have good answers to those questions. You just have to be prepared for it. These skills right here. So it's great. It's a wonderful tool. Love the tool. All right, I'm going to end this presentation, this rather lengthy presentation, by just pointing out the fact that in your notes for this course, you have some specific information about the 5 components of cooperative learning and how those components relate to building community in a classroom. Okay, I am a big proponent of the model of collaboration skill development called cooperative learning. So just really quickly, I'll rattle through these really fast. One category is positive interdependence, and that's where you develop strategies that provide opportunities for learners to interact with each other and to be dependent on each other in positive ways. Another one is the fact that you have to have strategies that hold individuals in a group accountable, even if they're in a group. You also include strategies in cooperative learning that promote face-to-face interaction and then process those interactions in order to ensure that those interactions are constructive and not destructive. And as part of that, you need to promote explicitly the interpersonal and small group skills needed to actually succeed in face-to-face interactions. And the last group of strategies has to do with processing typical interactions with students. And it takes time and energy and effort and organization in order to do that. And one of the things that we're going to be addressing in the class is how technology might be used to help you process with the group easily, effectively, and quickly. And that's why I'm a big fan of a tool like Class Dojo, because it can do that. So I encourage you in the upcoming projects to review the class notes. And again, we're only like with instruction, we're only scratching the surface with community building, but these are all very important skills and very important areas of teaching where technology can actually make a tremendous difference and provide a tremendous amount of benefits for teachers who believe that community building is one of their more important jobs as professional educators.